Coming up, a blowout in Phoenix and a dramatic finish in Salt Lake City against the champs. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA, local experts going over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. A shocking finish in Utah as the Jazz get a steal and a dunk in the final seconds to take down Golden State. We got to check in with our Locked On hosts on that dramatic finish.
It was a final seconds of one thing after another that had to go perfectly for the Utah Jazz for them to get a win tonight, and it happened. A final play that will go down in the Jazz annals as one of the great finishes of all time. As with up by one, the Warriors inbounded to Jordan Poole. Nickeil Alexander-Walker knocked the ball away. It was picked up by Malik Beasley. Malik Beasley bounced it to Simone Fontecchio, who dunked with 1.4 seconds left. And the Jazz came away with a win that was seriously improbable, with a win probability that was probably below 2% at that point in time. Could only happen because of the fact that Malik Beasley had hit a three when Alexander Walker bypassed a layup on the play before. Could only have happened because Jordan Poole missed only a second free throw in 30 attempts in his career in the clutch. Could only happen because Jonathan Kuminga missed another free throw. And a remarkable win by the Utah Jazz.
The Golden State Warriors had a 4-point lead with 8 seconds remaining and lost. I'm Cyrus Sauces with your Locked On Warriors Locked On Now recap of the defending world champions losing a tough one to the Utah Jazz thanks to a Jordan Poole turnover leading to a Simone Fontecchio slam dunk with 1.4 seconds remaining, resulting in a stunning 124-123 loss at Vivint Arena. The turnover marred a brilliant game by the Poole party, who scored a game-high 36 points to go with 8 assists, and the loss marred a brilliant game by Jonathan Kuminga, who had some savage dunks while scoring a season-high 24 points, but it wasn't enough as the Warriors fell to 2-11 on the road this season. Kevin Dana joins me on tomorrow's show to break it all down, and follow the program on Twitter at Locked On Dubs.
The Celtics spoiled Chris Paul's return with an absolute drubbing of Phoenix. At one point, they led by 45 points. Locked On Celtics in to go over another statement win for the C's.
Utter domination from the Celtics over the West's best. I'm John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast. And early on, the Suns were playing well. Chris Paul was slinging it. They had a 3-point lead. Then he went to the bench, and the Celtics went on a huge run. And then they started missing everything. Started turning the ball over. The Celtics defense was playing great. The Celtics offense was playing great. And this is what happens when the Celtics have both things working at the same time. And really what's most impressive to me here is the third quarter, when the Celtics had a big halftime lead. They didn't come out and play passive. They came out and sent a message. This game was on ESPN, a nationally televised game. And they let the league know, if you're coming to the Celtics with anything less than your best, this is what happens. The Celtics dominating from start to finish, and they let everybody know. Now they go off to face the Golden State Warriors.
Julius Randle with a big night at MSG sent the reeling Hawks home with another loss on their record. Locked On Knicks and Locked On Hawks in with the details.
Who's the real king of Broadway? Might just be Julius Randle. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Gaffin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast, following a 113-89 victory for the Knicks over the shorthanded Hawks, who were missing 3 starters. Once DeJounte Murray left with an ankle injury, and Julius Randle took full advantage, 34 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, raining holy fire from three-point range, going 6 of 12 from that distance. But the most impressive part of his performance might have been his passing. It started off early with an absolute dot to Quentin Grimes in the opposite corner that evaded 3 different Hawks defenders. And then he got his eye manipulation game going, a couple of double pumps, one to Mitchell Robinson for a wide open dunk under the rim, and then a beauty where he jumped in the paint, looked towards the corner, baited a Hawks defender, and then found Quentin Grimes on the left wing for one of his many three-pointers on the night, on the way to a season-high 23 points. A masterstroke of a performance for Julius Randle.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks have now lost 5 of the last 7 games, falling in New York to the Knicks on this Wednesday evening by a final score of 113-89. The Hawks simply could not make a jump shot in this game. Ended up 6 of 36 from 3, and that was actually an improvement down the stretch, whereas the Knicks shot the ball very well, 17 of 36. So the Hawks lost 33 points from beyond the arc in this game. That was the broadest, biggest story of the night. But beyond that, the Hawks also lost DeJounte Murray to injury after about 4 minutes of this game. He had an ankle sprain and was not able to return. And in conjunction with DeAndre Hunter and John Collins, both also missing this game, the Hawks were down 3 of their better players, 3 starters, and it was a perfect storm of events up at MSG on this evening. We'll have full coverage of this game and more on Locked On Hawks podcast.
Coming up, another record-breaking night for Ja Morant. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by BetOnline. It is the #1 spot for all of your online sports betting needs. They have tons of stats there for you. You can bet on whatever sport interests you. Just head over to betonline.net. It's where the game starts. Welcome back. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Orlando Magic showed their grit and utilized some of that young talent on their roster to eke out an overtime win over the Clippers. Locked On Magic is in to dole out the praise.
The Orlando Magic have been waiting to show their resilience and turn it into a win, and boy, did they, beating the Los Angeles Clippers 116-111 in overtime. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, and the takeaway from tonight's game is the Magic's resiliency. Down by 18 after the end of the first quarter, giving up a ton of threes. The team locked in defensively in a way that they haven't done in a very, very long time, certainly not since Wendell Carter went out with an injury, and they kept it up. Even when they went down 15 early in the third, they kept fighting back. And that's been a characteristic that this team's wanted to develop and wanted to have throughout the course of this season. They finally showed it on the court, and they finally got the results. Orlando was able to pull ahead late in this game, force it to overtime, and then Paolo Banchero took over in overtime with 10 points, including 6 straight at the foul line to put this game away. It was a solid game from a young team that's really been searching and hunting for a win. They finally scratched one out, and they finally saw exactly how they need to play to get the job done.
Ja Morant dropped the 6th triple-double of his 3.5-year career yesterday. He now has the most triple-doubles in team history. Locked On Grizzlies goes over that feat and another win, while Locked On Thunder has the losing side.
Remember when somebody said that Ja Morant didn't make his teammates better? That was dumb to say then, and it's dumb to say now, especially after Ja Morant posts a triple-double and helps the Grizzlies run away in the second half from the Oklahoma City Thunder in another Memphis victory. I'm Joe Mullinax from Locked On Grizzlies, and Ja is the story once again in terms of his production, the way that he improves his team. But make no mistake, the team is getting better even with or without him. You have Zaire Williams getting healthier. You have stronger performances offensively from John Conchar. Jaren Jackson Jr. continuing to be a major force. The Oklahoma City Thunder did not have an answer for Jaren in this contest. And when the team played through Jaren, not necessarily just Ja, when they played through Jaren, they went on runs as well. These Grizzlies have layers, and Desmond Bane isn't even on the floor for Memphis right now. Look out, NBA. The Grizzlies are looking sharp.
The Oklahoma City Thunder fall to the Memphis Grizzlies, where they always struggle to play in Memphis. In this game, the length and the size of Memphis was just too much for Oklahoma City. However, the Thunder 3-ball is what kept them around for the majority of this game. I'm Raylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder, and the Thunder get their 3-game winning streak snapped in Memphis. They have too much length, too much size to compete around the rim. The Thunder shot poorly in the paint, but their 3-point ball kept them in the game until around the fourth quarter, and then this turned into a blowout. Only the second time this year that OKC has really been blown out. They lost by 20 points in this game to Memphis. So there's a lot to learn from, and the Thunder will continue this long road trip in Cleveland on Saturday.
Drew Holiday and Giannis combined for 66 points and handily take down the Kings last night. Locked On Bucks in to go over that home victory.
The Bucks continue their dominance over the Sacramento Kings. 12 straight wins over that franchise, and they did it 126-113 tonight at 5-4. And my name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast, and it was size and physicality that mattered in this game. The Bucks were physically dominant, 17 offensive rebounds leading to 25 second chance points. Brook Lopez was huge. Drew Holiday was huge. Giannis poured in another 35 points. He scored 30 plus in 8 straight games. But I want to talk about Drew Holiday. The Bucks are not a team that oftentimes will really look to take advantage of mismatches on the offensive end. But tonight, Drew Holiday did that. He scored 31 points, one of his best offensive games of the season, and he did it by attempting 19 two-point attempts. Whoever it was, whether it was De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Davion Mitchell, whoever it was in front of him, he liked the matchup. He went to work, and that's the aggressive Drew Holiday we love to see. The Bucks now 18-6 on the season. They are rolling.
The young Pacers squad battled back in Minnesota, but they couldn't quite complete that comeback against the Timberwolves. Locked On Pacers and Locked On Wolves have everything that you need to know.
Pacers get a lot from their stars and not a lot from anybody else in a loss in Minnesota. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, here to talk to you about the 121-115 win for Minnesota over the Pacers. Pacers did a good job to erase some big leads from Minnesota in this game. They were down 23 points in the second quarter, yet they were ahead almost the entire third quarter. They had some leads in the fourth as well, but Minnesota kept the Pacers at arm's length down the stretch when it mattered and got it done despite some huge nights from the Pacers' best players. Miles Turner had 23, Buddy Hield had 26, Tyrese Halliburton had 26 and 15 assists. They were all excellent, but none of the Pacers' role players stepped up in a meaningful way for this team. They all had off nights. They all struggled on the defensive end. They all turned it over a few too many times, and that's where the Pacers lost this game. They needed someone to step up, and they didn't get it. We'll talk about that and more about this team that just wrapped up a 2-5 long road trip on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
With no Karl Anthony Towns, the Timberwolves relied on their other 3 members of their big 4 to get the win, and they all came up big late in this one. I'm Ben Beacon with Locked On Wolves. D'Angelo Russell scored 15 points in the fourth quarter alone, hit a couple of big shots down the stretch. Rudy Gobert had a game-saving block on Buddy Hield, had a monster game himself, finishing with 16 points and 21 rebounds. He also hit the go-ahead free throws in the final minute. So game-saving block, go-ahead free throws for Rudy, plus a 20-plus rebound game. And Anthony Edwards stuffed the box score as well. He had 6 steals in this game, plus 8 assists, and scored the ball pretty well as well. Got to the line 10 times. This was a really complete win for Minnesota. They led by 20-plus in the first half. The Pacers came all the way back, but the Wolves came back themselves and tied going into the fourth quarter, were able to push ahead in the final minute. A really impressive all-around win. And the second time they've beaten the Pacers in the last couple of weeks. And Indiana's a good team, an above 500 team. Subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Wolves. Be sure to check out the post-game podcast. We'll break down this entire game there.
A double-double from Zion helped manage things for New Orleans as they got the win over Detroit. Locked On Pistons and Locked On Pelicans break it down post-game.
The Detroit Pistons lose a close one on the second end of a back-to-back to the New Orleans Pelicans. Host of the Locked On Pistons podcast, Kuka Hill here. Yes, the Pistons lost tonight against New Orleans, but I think they can be pretty happy with how they played tonight, especially after having to play Miami the night before. They went against a team led by Zion Williamson, a team in the New Orleans Pelicans who was on a 4-game win streak. Now they're on a 5-game win streak. That's a pretty good team over there. And the Pistons did the majority of this without Bojan Bogdanovic, who got tossed in the second half. They were led by a great performance by not only Killian Hayes, but also Sadiq Bey and also Jalen Duren. Those 3 guys played tremendous tonight, and we're going to talk about the 2 big lineup and maybe a change that should be made to that lineup in tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. But overall, a good game from the Detroit Pistons. They can be happy about this one. Killian Hayes played a really good game. Isaiah Stewart also played a nice game. Sadiq Bey played a really nice game off the bench, and Jalen Duren was just swallowing up the boards off the bench for the Pistons. We'll talk about all of this on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
Best team in the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans are making the claim. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans and Locked On NBA. That's 5 in a row for the Pelicans, and they are currently atop the Western Conference standings. While that's impressive by itself, it's the way they are winning that makes you think they could be a true title contender. Tough physical games, no problems we saw after they beat the Pistons on Wednesday. High offense scoring affairs, they did it against the Denver Nuggets. Defense first, they shut down the Raptors. And they're doing this while dealing with tons of injuries. Brandon Ingram is still out. He may return Sunday, is the target date against the Phoenix Suns, but he's only played 11 games with Zion Williamson so far. When you have the depth the Pelicans do, you can win a variety of different ways, and that bodes well for the regular season and the playoffs. But up next is their biggest challenge yet, with 2 straight games against the Suns, and we'll have a clear picture of this team on Monday.
Chicago Bulls were too much to handle for a Bradley Beal-less Wizards squad. Locked On Wizards is in for the recap.
Well, it's good, Wizards fans. It's your host, Ed Oliver, and welcome to Locked On Wizards podcast. The Washington Wizards lose to the Chicago Bulls 115-111. A very, very close game where the Wizards did have the lead down the stretch. They gave up an offensive rebound where Denny Avdia got a stop on Zach LaVine, but they just weren't able to corral the offensive rebound. Then they had to foul DeMar DeRozan, who made free throws to put the game, to put the Bulls up by 4. Then the Wizards got the ball back and scored, and then the Bulls got the ball back after we scored. They had to foul again, so they were down by 4, and the game was just out of reach towards the end of the game with about less than 5 seconds left. So just an unfortunate way for the Wizards to go out and lose that game after a tough effort. DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine went on a heater in the fourth quarter. Zach LaVine hit a big 3. DeMar DeRozan hit a couple big mid-range shots. But the Wizards had 5 guys in double figures. The starters, Denny Avdia improved, and Porzingis had a 28-point game. Kyle Kuzma with 21 points. The Wizards struggled from the three-point line, and they turned the ball over a lot and missed a lot of free throws tonight. Thanks for listening. Peace.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On NBA and, of course, your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.